Hey CityCast listener, producer Xander McMahon here, and you're about to hear our conversation taped at UMS on August 27th at Mutiny Information Cafe. We had some technical difficulties, the audio is not great, but we wanted to give everyone a chance to check it out anyways. So here's host Bree Davies chatting with musician Miguel Avina from Is Cali, Swallow Hill concert director Bruce Trujillo, and musician Wes Watkins.
So thank you all for joining me. So I think I want to start with UMS itself because this is the sort of entity we're functioning in today, the Underground Music Showcase. It's been around for many, many years. And this year in particular, to me it seems, well, first of all, let's say it started out more of an indie festival, and I think indie seems to be code for white often when we talk about music. But this year the lineup has diversified more than past years. And I wonder, as people that are playing the festival or part of the festival, do you feel like this change has been made because of the moment? Are you experiencing this as something that's just going to be how it is in the future? What are your thoughts about that, diversifying the UMS lineup?
I can kind of start, just from working in radio and kind of being able to look at the lineup really closely. Who do we want to speak with? Who do we want to have on air? Who are we catching the performances from? I think it's been kind of an upward trend for the past few years, but less than 5 to where It's been noticeable. This year is probably one of the most diverse lineups I've seen, it's particularly in sound, but in many other ways as well. But even 2019, it was like, this is actually pretty cool. Like, look at how many we have here. And I think a part of that is also that the Underground Music Showcase is becoming kind of a bigger name. I mean, it's been around for 21 years now. This is 21st year. But wow, it took 21 years to get to this lineup also. But yeah, I think 2018, 2019, it was like, oh, look at, there's more than a handful of artists that we can say it's a different sound, it's a different...
Yeah, not just in the musicians themselves, but the genres that we're seeing. I think it kind of functioned a little bit as an insular festival in a certain way, where if you were part of a section of the music scene, you were playing it, but if you weren't, you maybe weren't playing it. And now we're seeing it spread to different aspects of the music community, which I really like. We're seeing more R&B, we're seeing more hip. I mean, there were points when you wouldn't see any hip hop acts, to be honest with you.
And if I can go back to your comment about indie being code word for white, that's something that that I think is such an interesting thing, because it isn't actually. There's plenty of artists of color who are making indie music, but there is that perception, right, to where people are like, oh no, we don't want to play that because they're Latin or they're black. But it's they're making indie music, that it's a genre, it's not a look, it's not anything. And so that, I think, has also opened up doors where people are like, oh no, this is an indie artist and we should be playing them. We shouldn't be boxing in people because they have a certain look or a certain whatever. If it's indie music, it's indie music. Done.
Well, for me, it's interesting just sitting here even thinking about my first exposure to the UMS. 2009, I was sitting in the crowd of something very similar like this. It was actually, they were doing it at the church across the street. College of Arts and Media had put together some kind of talk. My sister and I attended, and just as an outsider, we felt as outsiders, as a band that had already been active for about 5 years and had never had the opportunity to play this festival. At that point, I pretty much just know one other band that was of Latin or Hispanic descent. That was, at the time, they were called Panal, but now they're Altas. And they were definitely trailblazers, and at least for me, in kind of being the model to follow as how to get into the scene. Now, for us, it was a very interesting way of getting into it. Just basically, we had an opportunity to play an unofficial bus that they had right outside of Three Kings one time, and Enrique from Panal was actually the one that had us play there. But other than that, even though we were an active band, there was really no way for us to get involved. And even to this day, it's very limited in terms of how other Hispanic rock bands can get involved into the scene. There's been many bands that have been active for many, many years, and the accessibility to the festival for those people is just simply not there. Now, it's it's like two-sided, right? Because it's also, it takes those people to actually expose themselves to this, to come down here on a Friday night, miss work, leave their babies at home, whatever the case may be, in order to be part of this culture as well, and to be here to also put in their grain of sand to create the diversity in the culture. So it's two-sided. And I've seen personally bands that have been like, hey man, you gotta submit. And then last minute it's like, oh, we didn't think about it or whatever. But so at that point, there's only so much I can do to also bring them in, and so much I can do to advocate for them. At the end of the day, each band is gonna have to advocate for themselves. But again, one of the barriers I see would be accessibility to the festival for other rock bands.
Well, it's interesting too, because you bring up Alta Penal, and they were sort of your entry point. So they're a fellow band that are representing, that are Hispanic or identify as Latinx, and they're saying to you, yeah, hey, come play with us. But that's what it took. It went in, it's not a booking person reaching out to you, you know what I mean? Even though you were, like you're saying, you're an active band for half a decade, and that's what it took. And that to me is, I think, a lot of people's experience, is somebody else, inviting, another musician inviting them in. Yeah, Wes.
Yeah, I mean, my experience is definitely that I was a side man for white male-fronted bands.
Yeah.
So I crossed over, which is cool, but I worry a little bit about, look, I am happy to see brown people getting paid, y'all. That's what we need, right?
Yes.
But the thing that does scare me still about UMS is while we're seeing that, like when I think about R&B or hip hop, I know maybe as many white-fronted R&B and hip hop bands here as I do black, if not more, right?
Yeah.
And there's an amount of fetishize. It's fiscally responsible to be woke now. Mm-hmm. So like, to be woke, all of a sudden it's like, oh, we support this and we support that, and then all of a sudden what we're experiencing is like, you're not actually. Because like you're saying, like for you to have to be invited in, for me to have to play with white bands to get in with my music, and almost 2,000 songs, one of them has to be a banger. I just think that like there is an amount of fetishization that exists in that, because it's fiscally responsible for these people. And I love you, UMS. But like I do think that like maybe the best option is like cats like, yeah, submit, we all need, like you said, like it's every band's job we gotta rep ourselves first. Nobody's gonna rep me if I don't rep me. But also that is not the experience that white musicians in Denver have, because white musicians rep white musicians. Yeah. So like at some point, I think that the fetishization is it's a little weird, And don't touch me, by the way.
So you're saying like the tokenization of like, oh, we've got an eclectic lineup this year. Like, what does that mean?
What does it mean?
What does it really mean? And so I have questions, one question for each of you individually. And Wes, I think I want to start with you because you kind of touched on it. And you've played with many bands over the years, along with being a band leader in your own projects. But I'm thinking in particular about a certain experience that you had playing with a certain band that just played Red Rocks. And at one point, you were the only musician of color in that band, but that band itself played certain elements of soul music and spirituals and was really rooted in, rock and roll is black music, but I wonder if you could talk. It's all black music. I wonder if you could talk about that particular experience, being in this very internationally visible band and being the only black member of a white soul band.
Well, I think the first thing I'd like to bring up is something I talk to students about often. Where like, there is only one thing that there's only one thing that separates influence or inspiration from appropriation, and that's acknowledgement. If you can acknowledge where it came from, what has gotten you to this point, then it's not appropriation. Now, one dude in that band who writes most of the songs is pretty good about saying, no, I just love this. I heard this song and was inspired to write this. That dude's pretty good about it. But the crowd would refuse to really acknowledge the fact that it was black music, like, especially at the time where it's like, I stopped playing trumpet because hashtag trumpet turned into something I didn't want to see, so I was like, I'm not playing trumpet anymore. I play flugelhorn, I play cornet. But especially around the time when that dude is like running for president, like the things that people would say to me were pretty off-putting, especially because everybody likes black music. You guys like folk?
Yeah.
You guys like rock and roll, soul, hip hop, metal? Like it's all like rooted in a place, you know? Like going to arts high school I think really taught me how to like start to see this, where I'm like, well, like, oh, I got all this classical music and stuff, and everybody assumes that Western civilization made pop music. But what has been popular has always been black music. So to be touring with that, to be the only black guy, I was just telling them, my first tour, I wore a fro wig the entire time because I'd never been to the Midwest, and I was worried about what the experience was going to be like. I was right,
Yeah.
but everybody likes a fro because there's a tokenization that happens with that. So like my experience there was, I mean, I learned a lot. I got to do some really cool things, but it really made me want to be in charge, because what I experienced more often than not was, calm down, Wes. How many times have you guys told somebody to calm down and it worked?
Usually the opposite happens.
Yeah,
in my
right?
experience.
So like that experience was very enlightening and maybe made me pretty pissed off with white culture musically, just because I'm like, well, you gotta show up or shut up, you know, like, and so if I'm being fetishized and tokenized, I'm talking to these people, but you don't have anything to say about it, well, like, what am I supposed to do there?
The conversation's only going one way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I just know you as a person that plays with everybody.
I like to say I play music of intention.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Miguel, your work as a multilingual musician, as well as someone who's done artist management and promotion, you've done a lot of work to bring the Hispanic and Latinx music and musicians to the forefront and create accessible ways for people to connect with that music. But it still has me thinking about this concept of indie, and it's so often separate or different from Spanish-speaking music. When in reality, like Bruce was pointing out, there's not a difference there.
Nope.
You know what I mean? It's not. Bruce, you do a whole show about this on Indie 1023 where you highlight these musicians, where in a perfect world they would just be part of the rotation of every
100%.
Yeah. How do you feel about that separation, Miguel?
Well, as far as in my point of view, or at least from my creative side and point of view, indie for me would be a genre, really, because in Mexico, there aren't indie bands. They play an indie style rock, and very much influenced by the indie bands of the UK or the United States or Europe, whatever. So there are indie bands, and they do separate themselves from other genres in Mexico. So in the Latin and the Hispanic side of things here in Denver, there are some bands that are considered indie as a genre, but I always haven't, like, my dad's always had an argument with me when I've mentioned that, when I've told people like we play indie rock or we have some indie rock influences, my dad says, well, everybody is indie rock, because the word really is stemming from independent, right? Being not signed or anything like that. So most of the bands in Denver, of course, are unsigned, and including the ones in the Hispanic community. So I don't know, that word doesn't really trigger me at all, because I see it more of a genre. But clearly there is a separation on the American side of things, or the Anglo side of things, where I guess the UMS is a little bit more rooted on representing indie bands, or that genre, or at least was for many, many years. Like Wes just mentioned, and you guys were mentioning, that the diversity in the lineup has had an upward trend, like in over the years. I mean, we played since 2011, I think was our first UMS, and since then, every year has added more Hispanic bands or Latin influence bands. But again, talking about tokenization, I mean, there was many years where I felt we were put in a position of not being able to compete directly with headlining slots of other bands that we felt we were comparable to in terms of like draw or just overall performance, because we were singing in Spanish, or because there was elements of our band that was in Spanish. But I think it just over the years, just doing our job and just breaking through has really got us where we are now.
Yeah. Bruce, can you talk a little bit about Especial, about your show on Indie 1023, and what you do with that show and sort of its existence within the bigger picture of radio?
Sure. So I created Especial because I am of mixed race. I am half Latin. and noticed that we don't really have, there's not a whole lot of Latin bands within a regular log in a radio throughout the day. And that's a shame, because there's a lot of artists that fit right in that would sound exactly the same, that you wouldn't know, but they're brown. That's the fact of it. And also looking at where we live. We live in Denver. We live in Colorazdan. Like there's a history here, by the way. There's also that, which is still prevalent, and it's unfortunate. And like you said earlier, a lot of these bands do fit right in, and it's unfortunate that, like within the past year and a half, past 6 months, I take that back. I have been told, like, oh, I've never added a song in Spanish before into a regular lineup, and it's like, I'm sorry, like, indie, formerly Open Air, has been around for 10 years. And then before that, the people that have been working with me have been in radio for decades. And it's like, this is the first time that you've added a song in Spanish, and it's not in a specialty show. So you brought up the dichotomy of, like, okay, we have this show, it's centralized in new and independent Latin-made music from around the Americas and right here in Colorado. And it has to exist because these artists do need to be put in the spotlight, but they're not next to other artists that are just as big, sound very similar, sometimes not as good, like, to be honest, often not as good. So, like, it's this weird dichotomy where we have to shine a spotlight onto these different artists, even though they should just kind of be
part of the bigger
picture. Yeah, and that's kind of the hope. And thankfully, where I work, we have been able to add more, like noticeably more.
Yeah. In
my log the other day, I was like, oh my god, there's like 5 Latin artists in this hour alone. That's so sick. But that has not historically been the case, and especially with indie, but with like national public radio types of radio stations, that's not necessarily the case, and especially in Colorado. And it's such a bummer, like, unless you want to, unless you're listening to like a specialty radio station where it's like we're playing these artists all the time. But when we have independent, we're playing indie music, whatever the case is, it's usually like, we're gonna play the Hold Steady, and we're gonna play Pavement, and I love those bands, by the way, but like, why aren't we playing Chicano Batman more often? Why aren't we playing Y La Bamba more often? Why aren't we, I could go on, and I do in a social, but it's a bummer that it has to exist, but it has to exist to get these bands at least on air at 10 p.m. on a Wednesday.
Yeah, it's that. Sorry, Wes, did you have something you wanted to share?
I was just thinking about the why when you were saying that, and I think like generic incarnations of what we intuitively do is safe. Like, why don't you see more brown people on the main stage at these festivals? Is because the generic incarnation of that is safe. You don't have to worry about the trauma that these people have experienced that created the art scaring people away. Like, it's like a thing where it's like the generic incarnation people feel is safe. So I love you for starting that program, because
it's
I think that's a thing.
But that says a lot
for
about
them,
the audience,
not for me,
too.
not for you, not for any of us.
Right, I was like,
not for Denver.
The audience skews white. I mean, if you've been walked down the street during UMS, a lot of white people, like.
Well, it's like, how many people identify with that, but then it's like, how many people really do identify with that? Because, you go out to these shows, and it is like, it's a safe space for people to go to that are brown, that are black, that are, whoever is playing on stage. But that doesn't mean that it isn't more accessible to other people. It doesn't mean that other people don't need to hear it.
I agree, yeah.
Yeah, and it's just, I think it's like a bigger pop question too. Like, I'm gonna make a song about heartache. Like, okay, we all get it, but like, that's not necessarily like the best music, and that doesn't mean that it's the only experience that is universal, or where a large swath of people have experienced the same thing. Those stories need to be heard, and they need to be told, and they need to be highlighted, whatever that is.
Yeah.
That's still very important, and a lot of people do still identify with it.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that.
Well, and Wes, I know that you are actively working right now to create a space for Black musicians to play together in an area of Denver, playing at the Meadowlark that was, is in 5 Points, which was a historically Black neighborhood, which has seen a lot of change. What are you doing, or what are you seeing when you are putting that night together?
Well, it's fun because there's accountability. The band holds me accountable. That's because they know I'm going to hold the venue and the audience accountable, and then the audience holds itself accountable. So there's accountability, and then they hold us accountable. It's accountability through, I'll stop the song and be like, hey, sir, that woman asked you to back up 3 times, and now I have to talk to you, so maybe back up or get the fuck out. You know, like, it's nice because that accountability hasn't existed. You know, when you have a jazz club open that books like 30% black headliners in a historic black jazz neighborhood, you can see the changes that have happened. I had to make that gig for that reason, you know?
Yeah.
And it is to go to the Meadowlark Wednesday nights.
Thanks.
What is your night at the Meadowlark, Wes?
Wednesday nights.
Wednesday nights. Come and hang out.
Good chicken sandwich.
Have good chicken sandwich.
There is the best chicken sandwich in Denver there.
I didn't know that. I did not know that.
Shimmy. Chicken sandwich is good. Feed Your Friends is his organization. It's good.
Good to know. Thank you. Bruce, so you also do a lot of work to diversify the scene. To me, on the booking side, you've created colorful Colorado collaborations to amplify artists of color. I don't want to say, do you feel like you're doing this work in vain, but are you seeing any larger change?
Yes, thankfully. So yeah, Colorful Colorado collaborations just turned a year old, by the way. We're super excited.
Yay.
We've done
Congratulations.
we've done 8 unique collaborations throughout the city and 1 in Colorado Springs. And one of the most wow moments for us was actually with our first collaboration this year with Nina de Freitas, and we partnered her with Alchemy Ritual Goods, and it was beautiful. Like, if anybody hasn't heard Nina sing, go home, bring the tissues, you will cry. But our sound guy that night, Ryan Fu, who is also a wonderful human being, does many things in the community. He then booked her for his birthday party, Ofuminati, and one of the guys, I don't know if it was with Levitt Pavilion or with Devachka. Either way, they saw Nina perform, and then she opened for Devachka. And it was this nice direct line where it was without Colorful Colorado, that might have taken a little bit longer for her to get onto that stage, and she belongs up there. She belongs on main stage here, and she wasn't booked here, by the way, and I'm upset about that. But that's one of those things where we've been able to see
a direct
that
correlation.
happens there, and we're working with artists that have definitely made a name for themselves already. The Reminders, they don't need our help, but that was one of the most beautiful nights of my life. Watching them perform in a tiny Jamaican restaurant while it's blizzarding outside in Colorado Springs, that was sick. But seeing Nina be able to go from just our little humble thing into performing at Levitt Pavilion with Devachka was beautiful.
That's amazing.
Thank you.
Miguel, can you talk a little about this too? Because you mentioned it too, just being somebody on the booking artist management side of things. Are you seeing bigger changes with the work that you're doing, or?
Well, I would say yes and no, because there's some, there are organizations and entities and booking and spaces that are open and actually put their money where their mouth is in terms of booking Latin bands and not only offering them to play on a Monday night or Tuesday night when no one's going to be there, even the most loyal fans. But yeah, I think there are entities that are doing that. With my experience, one of the ones that definitely has been very fair with that has been Ophelia's, which is, at this point, I believe still an independent venue, even though it's being booked by Live Nation when it opens. But not only just the venue that believes in itself, but the people that work there. So Randall from Ophelia's is the one, he's an advocate for that. I've been working with him since when he was in the Walnut Room, and kind of the same deal. We created these relationships that are fruitful and partnering up and making sure that it's a win-win kind of situation. And I believe strongly in that. To create these paths for diversity, there has to be a win-win situation. I'm not going in there just to try to take advantage of the place, but also I don't like to be taken advantage of. The last time I played the High Dive was in 2009, and that was a night that I sold 50 tickets and got paid $20. And I was like, I'm never coming back here. Because I felt like it had been, we had been taken advantage of, and I didn't feel that was fair, and I didn't feel the need to continue to play that venue, despite the fact that, it's a staple of the community here.
You're the kind of band I would see at the High Dive.
And
I
love the
is
place.
who I would see there.
I frequent it. I go see bands there, but the band has never played there since then. And I just feel, I have to have respect for myself and for my band when those kind of things happen. So to have a venue like Ophelia's, drop, $2K when you ask them for that and offer you a green room and decent treatment and food and drinks and everything, with no questions asked, knowing the kind of work that you're going to do. That's the kind of relationships that I want to build, and the kind of bridges that I want to also share with the rest of the bands, whether they're Anglo or Hispanic. But yeah, I think it has gotten better. Like I said, it's been a changing landscape here in Colorado, including the people that are booking the venues, so it's a constant having to do a little bit of work at the beginning again to form those relationships. Luckily, the people that we've chosen to continue to work with have moved into the right places. Many of them have moved up. I mean, Randall is the head booker at Levitt now, and we have a great relationship with them. Levitt let us do a festival, Rock de Mayo, for the first time, and we were headlining, and that was something that was a lot of work. It took years of work to do that. A lot of opening slots there, a lot of street work and just promoting and everything that got us there. So I'm optimistic in terms of the direction where things are going, but definitely we need a lot more people advocating and helping us. And it starts with the bands, but also the crowd, and them being open to going to those experiences, being open to experiencing them, and also supporting them.
Yeah. And you bring up people that are doing this sort of back end of the industry, the booking, running the venue, doing the sound. Do you all see a shift in that as well? Because when we say diversifying the music scene, does that just mean we see folks of color on stage more often? Or are we actually seeing them in those positions that are often the better paid? Let's be honest, they're the better paid, more consistently paid positions.
No. In my experience, it's cats like you two or myself who build our shows and anything we're doing, we build it from the ground up. That's where you see those roles. That doesn't mean we're getting paid the same wages. And in fact, most of the time, I think that we're probably, when we're in those positions, getting paid less because we're trying to make sure that we represent, or doing it for free, because we're trying to represent those that we're booking. But I know that Herman's now is part owner by James, and that's a black man.
I wondered, actually, I just noticed Herman's lineup more
There's
often.
still a lot of work to do.
There is a lot of work to do at Herman's Hideaway. If you've been in Denver for a while, it's interesting. But I have noticed more black artists playing there.
Yeah, but now, that's part owned by a black man. But can you guys think of any venues in town that the head talent buyer or the manager or the owner are a person of color? I can't think of one.
I'm half, and I am now talent buyer, and that's cool. You hired a light tan person.
Yeah, I don't think it's very unfair, I think.
Yeah, I was talking with Celeste, who's my co-founder with Colorful Colorado Collaborations, and we're are there any venues in Denver that are owned, booked, run by a BIPOC person? And there are not. And so we're should we open a venue? And yes, we should.
The answer is yes.
But okay, do we have the money? No, we're doing Colorful Colorado for free, by the way. We're doing all this extra stuff for free because we believe in it and we need it to be in our community, and it is important work. But damn, we don't get funding for that. We don't get anything for the other work that we're doing, but it's providing this space, and so hopefully one day we will be able to potentially buy a venue. But then you also look at the Aslan Theater. There's their taxes keep getting more and more and more down on Santa Fe, so they're being run out, and it's that's run by a brown couple, and they're so sick, they're so sweet, and they're so wonderful. But the building needs so much work on it. There's a lot of work that needs to go into that, and so what can we do to save those places? We have to the community has to come together to do that. But do we have enough money to do that?
It's hard to with somewhere like the Azalon, because I know my husband Greg did a lot of work there booking some stuff a couple of years ago with Timeo and Aurora, and they just don't trust a lot of folks for good reason.
Yeah.
They don't trust, you know what I mean? They've been in the city for a really long time, so it's even hard to be an older Chicano couple running this venue and trusting that, because this is something else I want to talk about too, is AEG and Live Nation are the two. So if you're not familiar with how booking works here in Denver, AEG and Live Nation are the two main major bookers of the big shows and the big venues. What what is your all's take on them in general? Do you feel like they're doing any of this work that you all are clearly doing for no money?
Well, I will say, I mean, our relationship with AG has grown over the years. It started just because it was a token kind of deal, like, oh, you're a Mexican band? Oh, you know how to talk to Mexican people? Yeah, you can help us sell some tickets. It started like that.
Yeah.
And it took a long time to work. I think a lot more work than I was seeing other bands put in order to get to certain places. Our very first show at the Bluebird was with Rubedo, and that was the first time that they semi-trusted us. They were like, yeah, you've been playing for this long, and I know you can draw this amount of people, but we don't know if we can trust you, like, even with all the work we had put in. And I mean, Greg will tell you, the deal wasn't even that sweet. We could have got a way better deal somewhere else, but it's also part of putting in the work and also kind of, I don't know, I guess taking one for the team, if so to speak, to say, like, this is how I'm going to get my foot in the door, and once you see me here, then you're really going to believe in me, or it's time to move on and work with somebody else. But luckily, the people that I work with there, the relationship has been, again, a win-win. We've gotten a lot of opportunities to open and play places that a lot of bands haven't, because we put in the work, and not only because we're a Mexican or like bilingual band. So it's been nice to see that that's being respected, but I will say it took a lot of extra work, like I said, more than I've seen other bands have to put in to get to those same places. But it's worked out well that they've been responsive. Live Nation, we've had the experience of working 2 shows with them, but one of them was at the Fillmore, and then it was like, again, one of those things where it was the person that booked us for that show had been someone that had booked us during Soda Jerks years, like, 7 or 8 years ago.
Promotion company,
But again, it was making an impression when we could at the opportunity that we had, playing for $50 at the time, because it was a show at the Summit. They literally paid us $50, but it was opening for Molotov, and I was like, I'll play that show for free.
I have played that $50 show to open for my favorite
band. But it was necessary to
yeah.
years later be like, hey, can we open at the Fillmore? They're like, there you go, because we know you've done the work.
The relationship is there.
Right.
Yeah. Bruce, what are your Bruce or Wes, what are your thoughts on the larger promoters?
I feel like when I stopped playing with that, first of all, I think that was my first Bluebird show too, actually. So thanks, Greg.
Thank you, Thank you, Greg.
I think after I stopped playing with that one band, then I stopped seeing the response from AG, which is really interesting. As soon as it was about me being in front of the band,
and not being the sideman for
and exclusively
the white band.
At that point, I quit everything, so I wasn't support for any white male-fronted band, And at that point, my communication with both of those places really died off. And I mean, not just those places, but a lot of places. So I don't know. I mean, I have some good friends in AEG, including a talent buyer who used to be the talent buyer for Dazzle, now is a production manager for Laramie Lounge, which is a very exciting thing for me,
It's good to have that person in that venue. That knows
but
you,
I mean,
but not really otherwise.
No, yeah, I mean, they don't care. They're like, he'll figure it out. And I do, but I shouldn't have to, But
yeah.
I don't know. Also, I just want to say, like, I whine and I think I got it bad, but then I think about, like, all of the brown women who brought me up through the scene in the first fucking place, like, where are they? And they're getting it even worse than, like we are, Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. Whatever, AEG.
Yeah.
Put me in Red Box.
Yeah, I kind of have to echo. I think that it's. I think that in a lot of different places in the music business, there's now we have to have like a quota. How many black artists are we booking? How many brown artists are we booking? How many women are we booking? How many 2S LGBTQ plus artists are we booking? And it's like, that's gross. Like, it feels disgusting. But unfortunately, for a lot of people, it's necessary, because it's like, it doesn't even cross your mind that this band would sound great with this other one should be there because they're black or they're brown or they're whatever. So it's like, you know, that's kind of what I see a lot. That's what I see a lot of the music industry as, and it's just like, let's fill some quotas and feel good about ourselves for booking this one Black artist this one time. Good job, right? Like, it feels icky because it is icky, and I especially I see that with AEG and Live Nation, and who's going to sell the most tickets. It's always going to be a Black artist. It's usually going to be a Black woman. We can talk about that, but like, all right, we'll bring in this Black artist, but then we're also going to have 3 nights of Fish or Avett Brothers or whatever up at Red Rocks, and it's like, okay. And those, I mean, but they do sell out, and so it's like there's that gross business side of it, but like, yeah. Right. So it's just, that's what I see it as. It's purely business. What's going to bring in the most money, and then what are we going to feel good about meeting our quota at?
Yeah. So why are they making us buy tickets? Why do we have to sell tickets? There's somebody who gets paid at least 3 times, if not 10 times more than me, whose job title is concert promoter. Like, get out of here, man. Like, you sell the tickets. Like, my job's write the songs, man. Like, go somewhere else.
Right, or pay me a living wage. I think about, as a person that's been a music critic here in Denver, I've put on shows in Denver, I've been in bands in Denver, who I tend to work with other women, or I tend to also just be around a lot of other queer artists, or just my people. So then bigger booking agents who have the job, the white guy that has the job calls me and says, well, I got this girl band coming through, and I need some local openers. Can you recommend people? And I'm like, why am I doing your job, but I can't get your job and do your job? And I think, Bruce, you're a great example. You are in that position, but you're saying, cool, first, mixed person doing this job in the white landscape of booking agents, but they're still finding ways to have us do their jobs,
Absolutely. And like, I mean, even in any part, and I think a lot of femmes can probably like relate to this. We're doing all this extra work, and I can't speak as a Black person or a total brown person either, but like, it's like, Miguel, you know other Latin artists, right? Like, do this job for me. Recommend 5 bands.
Yeah. I'm gonna call my friend in a Latin band and have him do it.
I get 1 or 2 texts every month, like, hey man, what do you think about this band? And they're like, how many tickets do you think they'll bring? Like, I'm just sitting there like, man.
Like, why is this I'm not even getting paid to do your job.
Yeah.
And the other thing,
just go to the show.
That's what I'm saying. Why don't we ever see
Come
you
to any
there?
of the shows that I booked and check out the bands that you're asking me
Now,
about, and then you might actually have an answer to your question.
But the thing is, though, that I will recognize that the times that I've had feedback, I've been heard, and I've seen it as a better situation for the community, because those bands get to come here. Like, they'll ask me about indie bands that no one else is going to take a chance on. Yeah. And I'm like, honestly, dude, they're going to sell 300 tickets, but bring them because they're great. And then they bring the bands and they're here, and so many people are grateful. They're like, how did this band even get here, It's exciting to be part of that, because again, there is a dirty side to the business, but at the same time, if I were to just be like, no, I'm not going to tell you, or I'm not going to help, then it might not happen.
Right. Miguel, can you talk, we were talking before the show, but you were talking about a group of musicians that you're working with around diversity. Can you just tell us what that is or what you're doing?
So the project is called Bodies of Culture. It's being put together by Andy at Levitt Pavilions. He is just kind of the facilitator. He's not the owner of the crew or anything like that. He was just kind of the one that kind of called around and was like trying to integrate people into the crew. And basically the idea behind it is to create accountability and awareness of diversity in the music and arts community in general. So it's a diverse cast of characters that are on the group. We do bi-weekly meetings, but the whole plan, there's a lot of different missions or parts of the mission that we're trying to put together. One of them would be like to actually formalize a survey that venues could fill out in terms of cultural diversity and accountability. But there's a lot that comes with that, because like Bruce was talking about people that are just checking off boxes and saying, yeah, we booked 10% Hispanic bands last month, but yeah, they were on Tuesday nights or Monday nights.
They were on the worst night of the week.
Right. And so how you gauge the quality of the booking is also, it gets tricky. The ultimate goal would be that this Bodies of Culture entity would be not necessarily like well, kind of like a stamp of approval and say, yeah, this venue is actually working. It's a safe space for people of color, for women, for Hispanic bands and artists to come to. That would be kind of the idea behind it. So it's been a pleasure to be part of it. Right now it's still kind of in the working stages. Hopefully it'll be officially like launching in the next coming months, but really the people that are involved on it have been in the community for many, many years. So the experience like that everybody's bringing together, I think is invaluable.
If you all could, if one thing could change tomorrow about the music scene, or you could see one major change happen that would make things better, you think, for the artists in general, what would it be? I know that's a big, broad question.
It's the same thing that it would be for life in me. I would never find myself in a homogenous room because it's not interesting. It's boring. It's like not fun. It's not fiscally responsible for everybody. I would like to be able to walk into a place that has integrated faculty, integrated representation, integrated crowds, because that's what makes, or at least that's what we all got lied to and told, that's what makes America America. And so I just feel like if we really want, as we listen to the radio, as we listen to pop music, as we watch all of this, if we really want like to live what it's supposed to be, like we keep saying it's supposed to be, like what the first thing we need is exactly what you're working on, Miguel, you know, and all of us are working on, but that organization especially, you know, is like, make an integrated room, you know, like, no offense, y'all, but this is kind of homogenous for me, you know, that's why I worked so hard to start a gig where like it's always going to be black faces on stage so that black people feel comfortable to come. Because
Absolutely.
It's scary for me to walk into a homogenous room, you know, so I always talk about, and people's perceptions will change. I always talk about how like if there's a crew of all men, say it was all men in this room, and one woman walks in, how much does every man's attitude in the joint change? And not necessarily for the better, but if that same room is 50% and 50%, anybody who walks in knows that there's going to be some amount of accountability that's going to be held, everybody's held to. And so I think, for me, the big thing that we could do for artists, but not just artists, just people, like across the globe, is really actively start trying to create a world where like everything is integrated, you know?
Mm-hmm. And I think we're seeing it a little bit more with our venues, not as much as we could. I would say 10 years ago, though, what venues, you know, where black artists played was certain venues,
El
where white
Chapultepec.
artists played was, or El Chapultepec, which was everyone, you know, which was a rarity, unfortunately.
Yeah. But then like, I wasn't around. But then 40 years ago, what was it like in Denver?
Right.
In 5 Points, you know? As jazz, 50 years, 60 years, you know? As jazz was pop music, like, all of that was integrated. Like,
Yeah.
and then they were like, oh, wow, look, there's money here. You're not allowed. Go home.
Yeah.
What home?
Yeah.
You took it, you know? So I do think Denver, unfortunately, from like the 60s up until this moment, has worked very hard to make sure that it is segregated rooms, because for some reason everybody's convinced that only white people got money.
Great point. Great point.
I think to go along further with that, and this is something that I am looking at going into Swallow Hill. Swallow Hill does have like a pretty good history of booking a range of music in all of the different ways, but who is attending these shows? Traditionally white folks, because you know, Swallow Hill started as Denver Folk Alliance, but like even if we look at the term folk music, like it's not white, but that is who the base is. And how can we, like, have we done work to go into 5 Points? Have we gone into Westward? Have we gone into the north side pre-gentrification, before it became what, low-high or whatever they call it now? Like, okay, have we low-high? That's like, there's another name. That's
a different show, you guys.
Sobo. But like, how much have we gone out to find audience and make sure that we are serving that audience? Not like, you come here, like, are we going out there? So that's something that I'm trying to do, and that's what I would like to see. I would love to see that tomorrow. Like, I want our audiences to look like the bands that we are booking. Because when it's an all-white audience at a Hawaiian festival or a black jazz, it's like, this seems kind of showcase, like, icky.
And that's
again.
because folks of color don't feel comfortable. I know this from booking events at like the Museum of Contemporary Art. It doesn't matter how many people of color I have on stage doing all sorts of parts of the festival, the people coming to the festival, that didn't change.
Yeah.
Because that institution itself didn't feel welcoming to folks, to not white people, frankly.
Yeah. So how can we make venues feel more comfortable and make them into safe spaces? That's what
Welcoming.
That's what I'm trying to do next, for sure.
Well, for me to talk a little bit about that as well, and like the spaces for the market that we work, right? So it's been a challenge because we've had to build and pick and choose places where our community will thrive, where they will feel comfortable. You mentioned like the Aslan Theater. My dad was booking shows there like since 2003, like rock bands and a big empty space, really, because we never got over 100 people for those shows, but nevertheless, the community was there. It was authentic. It was people were gathering for like a real reason, right? It wasn't a hype thing. It was just like the rockeros mexicanos that were there for that, to experience that.
And it was known as a place like that for a
Yes.
long time.
Yes.
People knew I can go there.
Now, creating those spaces again, I'm gonna play a little bit devil's advocate here. It takes both sides. Like,
Sure.
I know people that wouldn't come down, like from my crowd, would not come and see me at the time when it was like Three Kings and we were playing UMS. They just would not come here. They'd be like, "What is this place? It's sweaty. It's smelly. It's no."
They got that AC now, though.
Yeah, now they do. But you know, you have to understand those kinds of situations. So we take them to Ophelia's, right? Super clean place. It's sound production is great, screens, bathrooms are clean, everything is there. Now, drinks are like $10 for a beer, right? But like we were talking about that, like how on the business side, when they recognize, hey, there's money here, it's like they also put their money where their mouth is. So it's like, all right, we're gonna open the doors on a Saturday night when we could be playing whatever else, but we choose to have a rock band in Spanish with a full Latin lineup, just because the crowd is going to be responsive. They're going to come out, they're going to spend money, they're going to feel respected, which they do. Like, our crowds love to go to that place because they get taken care of. The staff is super friendly, they don't make a face at you.
It's also integrated.
It's
Yeah.
integrated, exactly.
Yeah.
Now, I will tell you my early experiences coming down to South Broadway, I'm talking about 2007, 2008, I didn't feel like that. I felt like an outsider because I didn't feel part of the scene, but it wasn't until I started also talking and creating that community, you know? I think that's important. It's always a two-sided thing, but accessibility to me is one of the key things that's missing to create this diversity. The accessibility, like the language, the space, the awareness, and the equity. I think the equity is key because we can't just say, just open the doors and let any Hispanic band play here. No, we have to actually work a little harder to get people to come out here. So we need to spend a little extra on promotion to get people from Aurora, from Lakewood, from Thornton to come down to South Broadway. We can't just say, hey, it's open to everybody. No, we have to put the work in.
That's a great point.
Yeah, saying that something is open, like, that doesn't make it so, and it doesn't mean that marketing, those marketing dollars are reaching into the different neighborhoods where people live. Like, I think with marketing, it's just centralized into Denver, and it's like, yeah, I'll put some stuff downtown, we'll like put it on Facebook towards our targeted audience, and it's like, then you're just talking to the same people over and over and over again, and you're expecting, you know, if you book this lineup where it's all black and brown artists, like, that doesn't make the audience so, and that doesn't make it a safe space for those people either.
There's all these other cues that people are reading, like why they are not welcome in a space. But a big part too, like you're saying, is marketing. Like, a lot of folks live outside of Denver, so we need to invite them to South Broadway, for instance. You know, like, you're right, and I think that's something we've experienced as a city. As folks are displaced, they're still wanting to be a part of what's happening in Denver. They just happen to live in Aurora now, or Wheat Ridge, or Nevada, you know.
Yeah, and I guess we can look at those historically like black and brown places, but they're now white anyway,
Right.
so it doesn't like.
The
Well,
census just came
well.
out. That's pretty much what happened. Well, thank you three so much for joining me today. This was awesome.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. And thank you all for coming. This is like amazing that we have this full room. We were a little bit worried, so we all brought our significant others, and we're like, well, you know, if no one shows up, at least my husband's here, being happy, excited. But thank you guys so much. Alexandra, Are you going to come up and do? Oh yeah, we're going to do a little Q&A if anybody has questions.
I don't know how long this mic cord is, so maybe we could just project because it's a small space.
What they asked.
Sure.
So yeah, did you have a question? Yeah, actually, if you want to come up, that would be
Yeah,
awesome.
maybe that's a good way to do it. Yeah, just come on up.
Hi, first of all, thank you so much. My name's Liz. I just moved here from Oakland, California. And this is the first moment I felt at home since I moved here. So thank you for introducing this and putting this conversation together. I've also been in the music industry for over a decade. I wanted to hear your perspectives on block programming, on the pros and cons both for broadcast as well as live performances. Back in the 80s and 90s, there used to be these crazy bills with all different genres. You get a really mixed crowd for that. And I feel like that's changed quite a bit. And yeah, just love to hear your perspective.
So you're asking like block programming, like types of artists playing together, or?
Yeah, like the Latin Hour, or when Taco Tuesdays and a mariachi band, like that type of stuff.
Thank you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, what up,
We're looking at
guys?
you.
Okay, so actually with both of those, it's really interesting. So I kind of touched base on it with like Especial and having like these specialty hours, and we see it with a lot of different things. Like if there's a full hour of music with women in it, it's a specialty show. But if it's a full hour of men in it, it's radio. But that seems to be like, that's the case across the board, right? And it's like, if it's an all black lineup, it's a special type of thing versus an all white lineup, it's a show. Like that is a problem, but then we can go further into genres, right? And that's a beautiful thing about the DIY space is that like you get all of those different genres. You're going to hear 4 or 5 different types of things in one night, and you're going to discover something new. You're going to be inspired by something different, and it is going away. And I think part of that is like, how are we going to keep the most listeners? How are we going to bring in the biggest audience? And like intuitively, we can say if we book these 5 different acts, like we'll say 3 because 5 is becoming too long for me anymore. I'm a grandma now. But if we have these 3 different genres, maybe a couple of different people from each one is going to come, but it's not going to be as much as if we have like this one block of like, we'll say like Weezer and Fall Out Boy and whatever that tour
I was just
is, right?
thinking of that show, like Weezer, Fall Out Boy, and Green Day. I think it was.
Yeah.
Maybe. I was
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Okay.
That is a high. You want to make some money?
And they
That's
are.
a
They're making a
lineup.
ton of money. But is it serving community? Is it serving its purpose? No, absolutely not. And it does that with radio too. And there's a whole reason why radio all sounds the same. There's a reason why you can tune at 8 in the morning and 5 at night and hear the same goddamn song 3 times in the same hour. That it's a formula, and it's because most people will listen. But is it serving the community? Is it serving what it's supposed to? Not necessarily, but that's why we still have community radio. That's why we still have DIY spaces and independent venues and those types of things. And it is super important to be able to branch out and like say, we're actually going to do these different things because we need to. And what's really wonderful, especially about the Denver music scene, welcome by the way, is that Denver is super supportive. I love hearing like, you hear a new band and there will be a new band and I'll have 4 or 5 different other bands be like, have you heard these guys? Have you heard these guys? Like, check them out. They should be on your radio show. And it's true. They're great. But I wouldn't have known about that without these 5 other people telling me. But they do step up and say like, yeah, you should book this band. You should play them on your show, giving up that slot that they could have. And I will say it normally happens from other BIPOC artists or femme artists or whatever, but it is growing. I think, there's always that business side, which is why we have to have that block programming and why we have to have the thing that kind of sounds the same and looks the same all the time. But those spaces are super important and we have to fight to keep them going.
And I would say we do, in Denver, in Colorado, we have a pretty cool independent radio landscape. We have KGNU, we have, The Drop is a newer one from Kubo, which is like the most wide variety of hip hop I've ever heard in my life on the radio. It kind of blows my mind what they're playing. Also, like Bruce's show, Especial and Indie 102.3. So we have a lot of ways to support that, but it isn't by any means the mainstream part of the radio, for sure.
Colorado does, by the way, have the most community stations out of any other state. It's pretty great. We're pretty cool, Colorado.
That's awesome. Any other questions? No? Cool.
I know nobody's asked this, but my band is playing tomorrow.
Oh yeah, I want you guys to all promote what you're doing this weekend.
Great. So my band is playing. Iskali is playing tomorrow night or midnight at Stoney's Cantina. If you've never experienced my band, you should come out. It's going to be a fun show.
Super
Wes
fun.
actually plays with us, so he'll be there as well. But yeah, come out. I got some goodies for you. They're in my car. I'm going to bring them back out here so you don't forget about the show. So
Thank you,
that's
Miguel.
shameless promotion. That's what I like
Please
to
do. Please promote. Yeah, and when do you
Also-
play, Wes?
My other band is playing tonight at HQ at 10:40, I think.
At HQ, okay.
HQ.
Old Three Kings.
Old Three Kings, the artist formerly known as Three Kings. Yeah.
And then, Bruce, where can we find you, or where do you wanna
Indy
promote?
1023. Yeah, Indy 1023 is here all weekend. We've got a tent kind of over by the showcase stage. Listen to Especial 6 p.m. on Sunday night. It's all UMS artists, the Latin UMS artists. So you can hear Scotty on it. A live recording actually from the Levitt Pavilion. And yeah, we're going to be around. I'm going to be going to a lot of different spots. Yeah, I'll be around.
Awesome. And you can catch CityCast Denver on any place you get your podcasts. You can visit my friend Peyton at the back. She would love for you to sign up for our newsletter. She writes it every day. I edit it every day. It's fantastic. I learn something new about the city from Peyton every day. And you can find more out about what we're doing there. So it's citycast. Oh gosh, what is our? Denver.citycast.fm. Thanks, Alexandra. Thank you all for being here. This is wonderful. And thank you for meeting me. Thank you guys.
Good.